This is How to Help Save Sharks, Part 2, Entanglement. Today I'm going to talk about another one of the ways that we help to save sharks, and it is directly through saving individuals from entanglement. I'll talk about why entanglement is bad, how it affects the shark's health and their behavior, the methods that I teach to help people learn how to remove entanglement, and then ways that you guys can help to get involved and help save more sharks. Specifically, directly from entanglement or indirectly through other methods. So thank you guys so much for following and supporting shark and marine conservation and subscribing. Be sure to check out Juan Shark's YouTube channel as well. He's going to be sharing different videos there. So aside from indirectly helping to save sharks through the passing of laws, by developing educational and immersive programs like One Ocean, or doing educational outreach in schools or awareness conservation campaigns, etc., one of my most favorite ways of helping to save sharks is directly helping to save individuals who are suffering from human impacts. So this could be fishing hooks, fishing lines, ropes, nets. We've seen packaging, plastic bans, bags. Juan Sharks and I have helped to save thousands of sharks, and I've helped others to learn how to use these methods. So I'm going to go into that, but first I want you to understand the health and behavioral implications. So if a shark bites onto a baited hook, which is just them trying to do their job, their ecological role is pick off the weak, wounded, injured, sick, dead, and dying, so a dead piece of fish, or sometimes the fishermen will use live fish that are struggling on a hook. It's really sad. Then the shark's gonna bite onto that hook, and then something can happen. One, the fisherman could cut the line and the shark swims away with a line and hook. Or two, the shark can struggle, cut the line on its own with its teeth sometimes, but oftentimes to do this they actually roll, so that line will get wrapped around their head and eventually they bite onto it. So again, they've got the hook, the line, and now it's wrapped around their head. Or sometimes they struggle and they can't break the line and nobody cuts the line and their jaw breaks open. So I'm sure if you've been following me in social media or Juan Sharks in social media, you've heard some of the stories about sharks like Roxy or Luana who have broken jaws. We have seen how much this has affected their ability to feed even on a dead animal that's washed offshore. And so it's definitely harder for them, which we've seen has led to further entanglement in nets as they change their foraging methods to try to find easier prey items because it's harder for them to hunt. Also, a jaw broken open, or a net or a line or a rope wrapped around them, any kind of chafing gear and cuts can lead to infection. It also affects their natural counter shading. So counter shading is the shark's natural camouflage. They're generally darker on the top and lighter underneath. So if you imagine if they have got any cuts or scars or a little bit more of their white mouth or face showing, that means any kind of prey item above them is going to be able to spot them a little bit easier, and we can see that ourselves as well. So that's going to affect, again, their success rate likely in predation. The infection stuff aside, although that is really important to address because we can see that in corals, we can see that in sharks, and sharks can actually get sick. A lot of people a long time ago used to think sharks can't get sick, they can't get cancer. That's been disproven, they absolutely can. A lot of that aside, you think about the suffering that the animal's going to go through if it's wrapped up in a net or a rope or fishing gear or a wire leader that's dragging something like a clamp or a dive or a fishing weight or a piece of wood or a jug. I've seen sharks having not only to have the hook going out and the line going out, sometimes from their throat, sometimes from the corner of their mouth, but also dragging something at the end of that wire that is also chafing them, or that fishing line that's also chafing them, or that rope that's also chafing them. And this has also a behavioral implication because those individuals are understandably agitated and probably frustrated, just as you would be, just as any other animal that's dragging something around would be, as that heavy clamp or metal weight or fishing lure or piece of wood or jug hits them, hits the side of their body. It's affecting their ability to be hydrodynamic, to move efficiently. So it can create exhaustion. It can also agitate them. And I've seen that sort of displaced aggression when they're in proximity of humans. And again, I think it's completely understandable from any kind of animal species that if you have a continual agitation, that you're gonna be probably a little bit more frustrated, and that frustration can be displaced as aggression. So just being aware of that, that's something that I've seen as well. Also, if they're dragging something, maybe it's a little shiny fishing lure or a shiny fishing weight, or a bright white jug, or even a piece of wood. Besides the fact that those things will cause chafing and continually cut into the animal and continually agitate it, it also changes the behavior of the other sharks around that shark. And then that shark can sometimes get bullied and get more attention, and it may just be that another shark is swimming up to check out the thing and they don't realize that it's attached to that shark. But because it's being treated differently, it can again affect their social hierarchy, which can then affect their behavior, which again pushes them out to a point where they are a little bit, on average, the sharks that I see suffering from entanglement do tend to be more agitated and generally more aggressive. So that's really unfortunate. That has a safety implication as well. And I just hate animal cruelty more than anything. So it's like to see an animal continuing to suffer, to see it's slowly getting its gills crushed in, or it's gotten its fins, broken and damaged. Its behavior, can't have that same social hierarchy. Or in the case of sea turtles, they'll get slow amputation. Sometimes their heads are actually tied to their front flippers. Dolphins with plastic bags on them, sharks with packaging bands on them, and dragging heavy things. It's just really sad to see that those individuals and those animals, because they don't have hands and ability to remove any of this stuff, that they have a lifetime of suffering. And it's not just the cuts themselves, but also how they're not able to swim as efficiently, breathe as efficiently, hunt as efficiently, feed as efficiently. So just, I hope that I can create some sympathy by sharing this, because out of sight is out of mind. And I know a lot of people don't spend as much time in the water, especially in proximity to a lot of these species. So to see that, it's really sad. And a lot of them, if they're not on the agitation side, they're on the scared side. And so that means it's even harder to help them, because they'll tend to stay lower in the social totem pole, lower in the water column, especially for the species out here in Hawaii at least, and further away. So sometimes we can't help them, and that's heartbreaking too, because that they need help, but there's only so much that we can do. So to my next point, what you can do and the methods that I teach. So I was really lucky to grow up with parents who had parents, my grandparents and great-grandparents, they're all swimmers, divers, love the water. Maybe it helped me to be a little bit better in the water. I do have a really good natural free dive ability, but you can develop that, and I've seen people develop that as they've come to work with One Ocean. Juan Sharks, yeah, his parents are water people too. He's got a 5-minute, 45-second breath hold. But it's also really important to learn animal behavior, because you don't want to just swim down or at a shark, because they may perceive that as an attack or attempted predation. They may perceive you as another predator, and rushing towards anything in the water column, especially if you have a lot of other sharks around, the other sharks may become interested in what you're doing. You never want to turn your back to any of them. So the best way to approach a shark if you wanted to help remove the entanglement is, first of all, do so only if you're working with sharks and you feel like you're really competent, or if it's a whale shark, like a harmless species like that. From above and behind is going to be the approach that's going to have the least implication on their behavior. So that's going to be the safest for you and the least changes to their behavior. And then if I can go down slow, I'll go down slow, going at them with speed. Aggression evokes aggression. And so I'm just always mindful that they don't know that I'm trying to help them, and they may snap back. Now, if I can get a first cut off and alleviate some of that drag or some of that pain, then a lot of times they'll circle back, and then it sort of turns into this feeling of like I'm a cleaning station, and they'll let me remove more and more and more. But sometimes, because I have to pull tension to get that leverage to be able to cut the line, some of them will just swim off because of that negative association of feeling the pain. But hopefully I'm able to cut the line as short as possible, so when they swim off with less drag, so less chance of it wrapping around them. If hopefully it's not wrapped around at that point. So I usually try and cut line as short as the body length so it has less of a chance of wrapping around. If there's any kind of metal clamps on it, anything that could get hooked into the reef if they're hunting at the bottom, really want to try and get that hardware off. The wire leaders I have to use wire cutters specifically for, and ropes, usually knives, and there's actually a pretty cool little hook knife that we can use that's used for whale entanglement as well. It's like 2 double knives inside of a hook. And so the approach methods, always being ready in case the shark snaps back at you, always being mindful of the sharks around you, and then finding that timing. So sometimes I will make a little bit of noise on the surface to bring the sharks up. Again, it's with controlled awareness. I don't really want to advise people to necessarily do this without proper training, because if you don't know what you're doing, you don't work with sharks, especially trying to like attract their attention so they move higher in the water column for something like this. Not a good idea. But I'm thinking more along the lines of like whale sharks or nurse sharks, or manta rays and sea turtles, depending on where you're at. And if you can't help that individual, if there's any kind of agency or a dive shop that may have someone that specializes in shark behavior or specializes in that marine species, reporting it to them so they have awareness, and then always diving with a knife too. Because a lot of times I've gotten calls from people who are like, hey, I see this shark in this cave down here on this side of the island, and they're like, we got really close, but we just didn't have a knife on us. So having a knife on you, and then calling someone who could potentially go and help out. And we've flown to other islands and other parts of the world to try and help remove entanglement as well. Part 4 of this particular saving sharks is how we can help reduce this, because it's one thing to help fix it on an individual level, but there are so many sharks that we won't see out there in the ocean who are suffering, so many marine animals who are suffering out of sight, and that's just heartbreaking. So how can we help to reduce the amount of fishing gear in the water and potential entanglement or actual entanglement? It's by not supporting the big industrial seafood fishing industry, because 50% of marine debris comes from them, and it is fishing gear. So it's nets, it's buoys, it's lines, it's ropes, it's things that really have implications specifically for sharks and marine life. And especially the nets that can continue to kill, and then as they kill, they're going to attract more sharks, and then the sharks get wrapped up in that, and then they can just go on forever killing indiscriminately, and those are called ghost nets. You guys can check that out, search ghost nets if you're not sure what that's about. The longline fisheries that have miles and miles and miles of baited hooks, as they bring them in, a lot of those animals are already dead, or they're wrapped up, or they cut the line, they leave a lot of line on there, and then they can die later, or broken jaws from that too. So lots of sad stuff. So staying away from big industrial seafood industry, or just staying away from seafood in general, because even the single line fishermen, unless you know of a spear fisherman, the spear fisherman's in the ecosystem. I have a lot more respect for that. They're looking at line of sight at what they're shooting, generally only taking what they need. If they're very knowledgeable, then they'll know the seasons for reproduction, so they're going to be selective about it. So trying to stay away from the seafood, and then always swimming, diving, snorkeling with a knife on, so you can help remove fishing line. And even if it's not directly from, let's say, like a shark or a mammal or sea turtle, removing it from the coral, because otherwise, if you've never noticed and swam, you see the coral wrapped up in fishing line, the coral will die. Or if there's strings around the coral, sometimes the animals, like the sea turtles, they'll eat the fishing line when it has algae growing on it, and they'll later ingest it, and then they'll try and get it out. They wrap it around their front flipper. They can amputate their flipper or tie their head to their flipper, block up their throat with hooks and fishing line. Or if it's strung between 2 points, seals, sharks, dolphins, sea turtles, trying to swim between those 2 points can get entangled and drown, or get a lot of injuries, broken fins, and or swim away entangled and then later drown too. So all the reasons that you want to swim and snorkel and free dive with a knife, and be on the lookout for fishing line. Again, keep your safety in mind, because if you do go to try and help remove entanglement, I don't want you guys to get entangled yourself. So always dive with a buddy, spot each other, look out for each other, report entanglement if you're not able to remove it yourself, And then the other ways that you guys can help out would be doing beach cleanups or removing floating marine debris that could be accidentally ingested or later become entangled, like ropes and nets and things like that are floating in the water column. And raising awareness about issues like this, because the ocean is beautiful from the surface, but for those of us that put on a mask and spend a lot of time underwater, we're seeing more and more plastics, more and more fishing line, and generally fewer and fewer fish outside of marine protected areas. So major implications for sharks, and I love being able to directly and indirectly help save them, and I hope you guys can get involved in these efforts for shark and marine conservation. For me personally, it's brought a tremendous amount of meaning and purpose to my life, living for something a lot bigger than myself, and I love being able to give back because they really need it. You know, they've been the underdog for generations and generations, just misunderstood, misperceived, misportrayed, and so we need more people to speak up for them, to raise awareness for their plight, because they are really important for the health of marine ecosystems that all life relies on. So thank you guys again so much for following, subscribing, supporting, sharing this with friends, and I hope you guys will join us in the water at One Ocean or at one of our reef and beach cleanups with One Ocean Conservation or Save the Sea Turtles, or do a cleanup on your own. Send us links to it, comment below, and I really appreciate you guys and wish you all the best. Aloha.